I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, January the 10th, brought to you in part by Joplin Regional Stockyards, the livestock capital of the four-state area. Big sale here for their Monday regular feeder cattle auction, expecting 11,000 head with over 50 loads of true yearlings there on offer. At the conclusion of the regular sale on Monday, they will be having a primetime livestock video right there from the barn. And they've got another 40 loads of cattle that are going to be offered on the primetime livestock video. So be sure and view and bid that sale on DV Auction, or get your order in there to a buyer that you have in the barn. But going to have a really nice offering at Joplin Regional Stockyards for the regular Monday sale. I want to apologize to you guys for not having a Friday feeder flash. I try not to ever do that, but once in a while that happens, and my friend John Campbell actually let it out of the bag. I was nervous about going to the National Western and defending my mutton busting title, and I don't like to brag about my success in the rodeo arena, but you know, in fact, I was there over the weekend, and I was just really nervous about being there, and it didn't turn out well. You know, I had asked John to be there to help me get on that Dorset ewe that had previously been unridden, but you know, the buck and chutes are too large for the mutton busting. And as popular as that event is getting to be, I can't understand why they don't have suitable facilities for that, because the buck and chutes are way too big. They're set up for those bucking horses and the bulls, and you have to get somebody to come in there and hold those sheep over and kind of in the corner to kind of keep them from moving, so you can get settled down in them and get your rope pulled and get going on there. Well, I asked John, not only because he's local there in La Junta and he's a friend of mine, but also because he's long been known as the sheep whisperer in eastern Colorado. He's got away with them. He's been seen several times with his pants stuffed in his boots, and he's just that's what he's known for. So I asked him if he'd come there and kind of get that sheep settled down in the chutes for me. Well, he was there and he did that, and I don't know what he whispered in that sheep's ear, but soon after he's whispered something in that sheep's ear, that sheep reared up on me, slammed me up against the back of the chutes. They had to pull me up out of there. The lamb come down and got its hoof caught in John's KN95 mask that he wears, you know, religiously, like all good Coloradans do. And whenever got that hoof caught in that mask strap around his ear, pulled him down in the chutes, stomped him pretty good. People that say that sheep can't kick, you know, that's sure not true, because I seen him get kicked pretty bad and stomped, and that they ended up having to let that sheep out. So we had to turn out on that one. I did get a redraw, but I was standing around in the back of the chutes waiting on it, and my protective vest was full of what I thought were M&Ms. I'd been eating those back there waiting on my redraw. And then, you know, I got upset stomach and wasn't able to get on the sheep. So that was kind of a bust. There's no video evidence of it due to the graphic nature of the images. So, but I do think John's going to be okay. He's got a big sale coming up here on Tuesday with 5,500 head on offer for another stock show special there at Winter Live in La Junta, Colorado. So be sure and get on Cattle USA or get there to the sale barn at La Junta and support him and Winter Livestock there for the big sale on Tuesday. But cattle markets were in the news all week last week. You know, it started out on Monday with the action plan that President Magoo come out with. It was a virtual meeting that supposedly they had farmers and ranchers listening in. I don't know how much of that was going on, but they did have the Secretary of Agriculture there and some other dignified people that were listening on, but it was basically just him reading off a teleprompter and nothing that he'd written himself, because you could tell by the way he was reading it, he had no clue what he was talking about, but it was a 4-tier action plan. Going to be an invest, strengthen, increase transparency, and enforce. But they are going to invest $1 billion of that money that they set aside for the COVID, because they're not sure what they're going to do with it anyway. So they're going to throw $1 billion at this, plus going to be a bunch of guaranteed loans, mostly to get new startup plants, smaller plants, locker plants, and some of these new processing facilities up and going. They're supposed to strengthen some of the laws that these packers have been breaking with non-competition practices that they've been doing. I'll believe that when I see it. They can make all the laws that they want, but if they don't enforce any of them, they don't do any good. Going to increase transparency, which they've already talked about doing that and passed that bill for the cattle formula transparency bill. So we're going to be seeing that come on. And then they say they are going to enforce some of these rules that packers have been breaking since the inception of the P&S Act back in the 20s. So I'll believe that when I see it for sure. I don't know how they're going to do that. They're setting up a tattletale line where you can call in whenever you see some of these things being done, and supposedly they're going to investigate it, and supposedly they're going to enforce those rules. Now, I'll believe that whenever they start writing checks to producers that have been screwed by anti-competition. I'll believe it when they do that, and they start writing checks to the consumers that end up having to pay way too much because of some of those antitrust acts that are being broken and things like that. But I don't know exactly, if we're going to see anything come through this. But it was a big talk about all week, and the major media got involved. It was kind of a slow week in news, so we saw several of the folks in animal agriculture get interviewed on some of the big news stations, and basically every news media was trying to push their own agenda whenever they were asking questions, and they had absolutely no idea what they were asking or what they were talking about or anything that had to do with the issue. You would have wished that maybe they had done some research before they started talking about this stuff, but really if they wanted to get up to date on what was going on, they needed to live it like most of us have. They needed to read the book The Jungle, that's over 100 years old, but still rings pretty true today. They also needed to read the book about the meat racket, and they needed to kind of follow the markets here for the last 20 years and seen how our negotiated trade has really evaporated down to nearly nothing, and see how the tail's actually wagging the dog now. But they're not going to take that much time to look into that stuff. But it was big talk, and we'll see if anything comes about it. What else happened last week? We heard more about labor challenges at the plants because we're seeing this new outbreak of COVID, even though it's more like a cold or a mild flu than it is, some of the variants that they had when we started. But still, if you get tested and you get tested positive, you can stay home for 5 days. So a lot of the laborers are taking advantage of that and don't think that those unions aren't pushing them to do it. We saw corn break $6 a bushel last week in the off season when we're not looking at any weather or yield or anything going on here domestically, but they are looking in South America, and the extreme weather patterns that they've had down there are not making it look like they're going to have a big bumper crop. But tell you what, they're just kind of looking at the supplies we have and the usage. And we've let this fuel get so high that those ethanol plants are wanting to use quite a bit of corn again. And we're going to have enough corn to get by on, but it is going to get really expensive. And we look at these cost of gains. You look at $6 corn. If you do the simple math, you can double that figure and figure that it's going to cost $1.20 to put a pound of gain on in the feedlots. That's going to be for your farmer feeders that can control their costs a lot more. You're looking at a commercial feedlot, and the way these inputs are now, it's going to be at least $1.30 cost of gain to put pounds on these cattle. And so we're seeing more demand for the heavier cattle. But this week we got further enough, pretty much as soon as we come through the holidays, we've got to the point where even those big heavy yearlings, you're not going to be able to cover yourself with the April board so much. So they've kind of backed off of them, even though yearlings feed so much better than the calves, and the prices have been so good on them for the last several months that they're going to be coming off of those now and looking at some long weaned calves with the right kind of genetics in there. And we saw that last week as calves were higher and the big feeder cattle were cheaper. But let's look at the board last week. Your February live cattle futures ended the week at 137.32. That was down $2.38 for the week. April ended the week at 142.05, but you know, getting back to $1.40. We saw that early this past week that we did see some 140 sales, but then by the end of the week they had slacked off. January feeder cattle were down hard all week long. You saw on Monday, January feeder cattle contracts were down 62. Tuesday they were down 357. Wednesday was down 55 cents. Thursday was up just 45, and then Friday down 47. So hard losses on your feeder cattle. January contract was down 477 at 162.10. But actually the 162.10 is higher than your real-time index that we do with DV auction, that's always up to date and current, and also higher than the latest available CME cash feeder cattle index. So even though we lost nearly $5 on your spot feeder cattle contract, we shouldn't worry that much, because it's just now getting into par, and we're getting well into that spot month already. March contracts on feeder cattle were down 328, so not as bad, at 166.67. Your corn contracts for March on Chicago Board of Trade were actually up 13.5, ending the week at 606 3/4. Kansas City hard red winter wheat for March was down around 25 cents for the week at 7.75, and beans were up 70 cents for the week at 14.10.5, so over $14 now for beans a bushel. But you look at your fat cattle trade, and like I said, early in the week it was pretty darn good. We come out of 2 weeks of holidays. Your packers were wanting to be aggressive with change speeds, but then a little bit of weather and some of those labor issues on the newest variant of COVID caused them to have to slack off a little bit. Through Thursday, they had only sold about 35,000 head negotiated cash sales, and we didn't get a whole lot more than that on Friday. So it's going to be really, really weak on our negotiated, pure negotiated sales for last week. We'll get them all rounded up by the next visit here. But that 35,000 compares to 62,500 during the New Year's week there, and almost 45,000 the same week a year ago. But as I said, early in the week they were selling cattle from 138 to 140. Not a lot of 140. Mostly the 140 was reserved for your regional packers that are so important to this industry, and we've got to keep them in business. And some of these new packing plants that are in planning stages, and some of them in building stages right now, they would help. And so I am behind that action plan, and hope that some of that money does help. But I just fear that they're going to have so much trouble, making it once they open up. And I hope they keep enough money in reserve, because these big four packers are going to play some serious hardball with them, and it's going to be worse on the meat sales end than it is on the cattle buying end. It's always worse there. But you looked at your sales, live sales of steers and heifers last week, 136 to 140. The 136 was real prevalent at the end of the week in the southern plains. So that was $2 lower. But your weighted average is not quite that much lower, only about $1 lower than we saw last week. But we don't have all of Friday's sales in there, but we'll see when we get the roundup done after Monday. But Dress sales of steers and heifers from 219 to 220. That was a lot lower on the top end, but mostly steady to $2 lower, and your weighted average is about $1 lower there too. But the few confirmed sales that we saw on Friday, negotiated cash in the 5 area, Iowa had about a short load there, only 3,600 for the whole week, and Friday's sales, what few there were at 138. Nebraska, about 1,300 head confirmed on Friday, about 18,500 head for the week, so not bad for such a light movement there. Live sales on Friday were 138 to 139 and 220 dressed. Kansas and Texas are the ones that succumbed the most on the market. Kansas, about 900 head on Friday, only about 5,000 head for the week, and their late week sales were at 136, which was fully $2 lower, but they're not really coming after those southern cattle as much. They want the higher grading cattle in the north because they've just gotten so used to that, and they want those loads of cattle that yield more prime carcasses, and we just don't see as much of that in the southern plains as we do in the north. Texas didn't have any confirmed sales on Friday, only about 3,800 head for the week. Box beef cutout values were higher collectively, and your weighted average on all of last week's sales were $3 higher on the choice at 268.03. Late Friday sales were even $3 and change higher than that at 271.82. So they're gaining ground. Packers are in the price that they're getting for their product. And remember, they're in the beef business, we're in the cattle business. And select dress sales last week on box beef cutout values, all of last week's sales, the weighted average was up $3.25 at 259.90. Late Friday sales were higher than that at 261.10. And had a good movement, 695 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. That's pretty good movement. And you would wonder why they're going so hard for the northern cattle when we have a choice select spread that's only about $8. You know, you'd think it was $13, $15, or $20 the way they're just going after those cattle in the north, because they are going to run out of them. They're going to be short of cattle. We're tight on market-ready supplies for the first full quarter of this year, so you guys got to play hardball whenever you're selling your fat cattle. You got to resist those lower bids and steady bids. Try to get as much market position as you can. Let's talk about what else is going on. We always feature a market of the month here on the Feeder Flash, and we're going to continue to do that. And I'm going to talk about a market that made it through the winter runs in the northern plains really well, held their own. Got some young guys in there driving that market, and they're doing a really good job. But your market of the month this time, and it's sponsored by DV Auction, is Faith Livestock Auction, run there by Dace Harper and Mason Dieterle, and they do a really good job there at Faith Livestock. They don't get hardly any attention. Don't get much market report coverage or anything like that from Federal State Market News, but we talk about them regularly here on the Feeder Flash, and they have top quotes all the time. Sold a jillion of those peewee calves that they were having to pull off in that really dry part of western South Dakota, but really good sales. Sold a lot of cows there too. But they do a really good job at Faith Livestock Auction. We want to congratulate them for being the market of the month. They've got a special replacement sale here today. Got a lot of cows and bulls and heifers there for that sale. And then they've got several special feeder cattle auctions coming up here the remainder of this month, and featuring a lot of those Bangs vaccinated heifers there. But good job to Faith Livestock Auction. Let's talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DV Auction ended the week last week based on an 800-pound steer at 161.24. That was $3.27 lower than the end of the previous week. You look at some of your big sales or your trends in your sales last week. Yearling feeders, like I was telling you earlier, even though they feed so much better and everybody wants them, you can't cover yourself with April board anymore. So they've backed off on them a little bit, steady to $3 lower on their true yearlings, even though they're scarce and they feed so much better than the calves. But reputation calves, and by this time of year, a lot of them are long weaned, had 2 rounds of shots at least, and your calves sold $4 to $8 higher all around the country in your sale barns last week. Give you some top quotes all around the circuit. I was out at Fallon, Nevada at Nevada Livestock Marketing on Friday. We sold 66 head, 447 pound steer calves there in Fallon, Nevada at $210. Way out west, guys, that's a big time quote. How about Sterling, Colorado? Sterling Livestock Commission sold 66 head on Friday, 558 pound steers at $207. How about Burwell, Nebraska? That's on the Yellow Brick Road, one of your featured premium sales up there. Burwell Livestock Market sold 119 head, 608 pound fancy steer calves at $199.50. But the best quote that I saw anywhere late last week is your National Beef Wire top quote for the day. Magnus Livestock Market in Huron, South Dakota sold 100 head, 811 pound feeder steers at $167.75. And that's your feeder flash for Monday.